In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie. My name is Ryan Roxie, and, well, this is a taped podcast. We have been doing live stream podcasts and taped podcasts all through this time because I guess we have some time on our hands, don't we? But the good news, so do all the artists that we're talking to. That's why we get some, I don't know, top names. I'm going to say top name, our guest today. He's in the trenches. He's been in the trenches. He's going to talk all about that. But he's definitely on his way out of the trenches and up to the top because he's been working his ass off. Would you welcome to the show, Jared James Nichols? There you are.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man. What's going on?
Hanging. Everything's great. Feeling good. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee at the moment. It's a beautiful day. Just taking it one day at a time.
I swore to my audience that this is going to be where you don't mention the C word in here. This is sort of our little safe spot. So
I'm down for that.
So the C, because you're bombarded by it as soon as you stop. As soon as you go outside or put on any sort of social media or any sort of news broadcast. So in here is a C-free zone. But I do want our audience to know how you've been coping with this sort of just hanging by yourself or just hanging with your family. How's it been?
It's been honestly, it's been a really, really, in a weird way, a really nice break. Because as we're always working, we always have our head just down, focused. This was a good opportunity for me to come up and see the whole world a little bit and to kind of get back to a perspective. It's been great, man. I mean, as I've been hanging with my family, it's been very quiet, but been working on new music, taking time to just spend with loved ones, and it's been a beautiful thing.
I would say for a lot of musicians, having sort of forced inclusion is could be you worked as a positive, could be looked upon as a positive, because that's when you get your creative juices start flowing and you almost have that time that usually if you're not running here, running there, or like you do a lot of touring, you do a lot of guitar clinics, and now you're like in your own little safe bunker I've been watching you on social media, putting out guitar licks. You've been putting out riffs, and it's been cool.
Yeah,
right?
no, it's all good, man. I think that initially, as most of us musicians, it was kind of like a shock, and I really didn't. I didn't, understand what was actually happening. It was like, okay, I'm going home. It's we're in the middle of my first ever headline Europe tour. And it was like, all right, we're going home. This will all be good. And I didn't really, wrap my head around it yet. But now it's at a point where, we have more time to do different stuff. And for me, it's a beautiful thing to work on new stuff and, just kind of get my head above water and to let it be. It's all good. It's all going to be good.
Well, you have been in the trenches, working your way to this point for a good many years. I mean, you moved to Los Angeles in 2010, right?
Yes. Yeah. The end of 2010, I moved to LA, and I went there and I told my parents, hey, I'm going to go to a music school, and, I'm going to get a degree and all this stuff. But really it was just, I grew up in Wisconsin, and I knew that being a professional musician in Wisconsin wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do.
Well, it's against the odds as well. Go to where the guitar players and all that stuff is going on at least. Now, then you give yourself a fighting chance. Did you do GIT?
I did. Yeah.
You know what? I'm an alumni. I'm like one of those early though alumni.
That's awesome.
I went there and right out of high school. I was 17. I graduated early, and I went there I guess when it was affordable, people would say. But
you were there in the golden age, I think. That was when GIT was GIT, right. Which is, we would sit there and they would show us all the old concerts and the footage and stuff, and it was the glory days. It's awesome, man.
Old glory. That's a reoccurring term that comes that you associate with yourself, and I want to talk about that a little bit. But let's go. Because it is a guitar based show, and I've got one of the best up and coming guitar players on it. I want to talk about GIT and what it actually did for you. Did you find that you learned more, or did it help you with your practice habits? What did you get out of it?
So check this out. When I was 17, my mom, God bless her, she took me to a camp at Berkeley in Boston. She was like, hey, there's a guitar camp there at this college. You can go there. It's like a week long. Because at that point, I was like all of us, obsessed with guitar already. And she was like feeding the urge. So I go to this guitar camp, and at the end of this camp, they're like, hey, you show some promise. Why don't you apply to get a scholarship to come to the school? And I was like, really? I couldn't believe it. So all I did is I went in a room, and there was like 5 of the professors there. And they said, just play us a song. So I played Lenny by Stevie Ray Vaughan, because I was like, oh, it's kind of jazzy. It's got a lot of different feel in it. And they were like, oh, they were like, okay, thanks, see you later. And I didn't expect anything to come. And like 2 weeks later, I was at home, and a letter came in the mail from Berkeley. And it was like, congratulations, you got a scholarship. It was like, what was it? It was like $7,000 per semester that they gave me the scholarship. And I was like, well, I guess I know what I'm doing. So I go to Boston. I go to Berkeley, 17 years old. And it was nothing like I had expected. I thought I was going to go there and become like this, like, I was obsessed with blues and rock. And when I got there, it was classical harmony, learning how to play keyboards, learning how to conduct an orchestra. Okay. And I was like, oh man, this is not my vibe. And I ended up leaving after about 7 months. And my mom was like mortified, man. She was like, oh my, she couldn't believe it. And, I didn't know what I was going to do. And it was right at that point where I was saying to myself, I love to learn. It wasn't that. That wasn't my, there was a lot of things involved in that I wasn't into. And then I found MI.
Well, and for you being in the Midwest, you basically could have gone, you went east or west. You had your choice. Mm-hmm. Me growing up in California, the sort of only choice for me was just to move south, because I had been going to Los Angeles my whole life, being raised in the Bay Area. So that was a much easier decision for me. But I think that the weirdest thing for me to think about you, whether it's Berklee School of Music or MI, is that your style, for those of you that haven't heard Jared James Nichols play yet, it's obviously a really cool, unique sound and style. You do not use a guitar pick. So you use your fingers. Your fingers is where your fingers from both your left hand and your right hand is what gets you your tone. Did you ever have problems like going there when they were teaching with plectrums for our European audience and picks and, saying, what are you doing using your fingers like picks?
Oh yeah, man. Of course. I think, that all derived because I'm left-handed, right? So when I'm writing with my left hand. When I originally picked up a guitar, I picked up a lefty. And my first teacher was like, dude, don't be a lefty guitar player. I was like 15 and he was like, if you're a lefty, he goes, how many lefty guitars do you ever see at a shop? If you're always going to have to carry your own guitar, special and all this stuff. And I was like, well, he's probably right. I should flip it. But when I flipped it, it was cool on like the fretting hand. But when it came to the pick, I just couldn't get along with a pick. So I played guitar for like 2.5 years with the pick, but I was like always in the back of my head, like, this sucks. And when I'd play at home, I was with my thumb and my index finger. So when I was like 17, 18, I started to like really, really get into blues guitar. So I was listening to guys, obviously like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Albert King and Jeff Beck and all this stuff. And I kept going to my fingerstyle stuff. And after a while I said, you know what, screw it. I didn't necessarily think to myself, this is how I'm gonna develop my sounds or my style or whatever. But I just said, this feels right to me. So I'm gonna go off on it. And that's when I like fully dedicated myself to not playing with a pick. And here we are years later, and it's like, I remember when I moved to LA and I wasn't playing with a pick, people started to like be like, oh, you're that dude, you're that pickless guy or whatever. And it became like a thing, which was really cool. I never expected that.
Man, I'm envious that you, because I'm left-handed as well, but it never felt good to play left-handed. I would have
Right.
jumped at the shot at the chance anytime because my biggest heroes, like all the guys that I thought were the coolest, like whether it's Jimi Hendrix, Paul McCartney, Kurt Cobain,
Yeah.
later, I was just thinking like these guys, they always look cooler when you're playing left. When you're playing lefty
Yeah,
style,
man.
and it always freaks people out when I tell them, "Well, I am left-handed, but my theory is this," and you can debunk it or whatever. But my theory is that when the guitar first started, you were supposed to. Your left hand was basically constant because your right hand needed all the coordination because you were doing a lot of arpeggios and a lot of work with your right hand. But with the invention of the guitar pick, I think that this left hand started moving around up and down the neck, and this one just went up and down, the right hand. So there was much more need for your left hand to be the coordinated one. Obviously, with your style, you use both your hands with kind of balanced coordination, but that's just my theory. I'm sticking to it. Why not?
No, man, I think you're right. And also what I noticed is when I stopped playing with a pick, not to get really nerdy, like it opened up my imagination a little more. So there was things I couldn't do, like especially like speed wise, like a lot of guys, when you're playing with a pick, it's a lot easier to do, certain rhythms, certain riffs, and, play faster on single note stuff. Yeah. I didn't really have that. So I kind of started to figure out different stuff. I started to turn to like different influences. Like I found like chicken picking guys, like country guys. And I wasn't into like country stuff, but all of a sudden I was like, hey, this, I can make those sounds a little different. So I was playing like all my blues and rock stuff, but it started to come out and sound a little different. And I got excited by that. So I would play a lot of the same licks that a lot of dudes would do with a pick, but it was the way that I was picking it. It would give it a totally different tone. And it was great, man. I'm very kind of still blown away that people are like, hey, I can't believe you don't play with a pick. Because to me now, it feels so natural. It's like I couldn't imagine only, playing with one single pick. It's like my fingers.
Is it the same like your left hand where you'd have the same callus build up on your right hand? And then
it gets bad. Like my girlfriend, she's like, your hands are disgusting. Like it's like my hands are like a mechanic hand, right? We know what the fretting hand feels like, but then, to have these like horrible calluses on the other hand, it's a weird situation.
Well, I guess you can't really put your hands next to each other and one of the hands is longer than the other because now they're both are all calloused up. That always freaks people out when I put my two hands next to each other.
Oh yeah.
And some of the fingers are much longer than the other ones on the same hand. But
definitely.
Orianthi, who I played with when I first got back into the Alice Cooper band in 2012, started touring with Alice again. Orianthi plays with a pick and fingers. She does like a hybrid. So she started showing me a couple licks, and I you always sort of grab something from every guitar player that you ever play with, and you sort of learn something, and you go, I like that, and so I can maybe utilize it in my playing. So I tried to, but it's nowhere close to what I see what you do,
And what I do though is, and not to like downplay it or whatever, it's like
it's totally unique.
Yeah, and no one ever really showed me how to do it, right? So I just started to experiment, and thankfully at the time, man, like when I was doing it, I was either sitting in a dorm room, like in Hollywood, or before that, I was literally in my parents' garage. Like, how can I make this sound? How can I do this? So I had the time, I wasn't trying to do it, trying to hold down a job, or I was just a kid. So I think about it now and it's like, man, the amount of hours and years that I spent, developing all this stuff, it's like, it was the perfect storm, because now I think as I get older, I would have been a lot more lazy. It was just such a perfect time that it all happened. And it's great. And, with guitar too, there's always this thing where I think naturally as guitar players, we're competitive, or there's always like, we're always watching each other and stuff. And for me, when I started to do kind of more of my own thing, I got more hyper focused on that instead of, trying to keep up or trying to, so for me now, guitar, I don't really look at it like competitively or anything like that. I just think that everyone does their own thing. And, because as far as technique goes, like I can only do what I can do. Right. Does that make sense?
No, it makes complete sense. And that's why I think you have the completely right attitude for guitar player, because what you do is unique unto you, and that's what makes you special. That's what gives you your tone. I always tell people that, you should know the fundamentals. You should know your scales. You should, if you really want to get into your modes and explore that, great. I don't feel it's 100% necessary, but
right.
You should know some scales so you have some sort of blueprints for your soloing. But then when it comes down to writing a solo, that's up to you, man. And that's up to your right hand and your left hand, your brain telling your hand what to do, and hopefully having good enough equipment that it translates. So
and I think that you because you've been a professional guitar player, and you've it's at the end of the day, I think having your own connection with the instrument means so much more than anything, really. I see so many guys that get worried or they say, I need more licks, or I need more, how do I do this lick? How do I do this lick? It's almost like a Zen thing. When you get the connection with the instrument, it's like, then you realize that you're never going to know everything. You're never going to have all the licks or riffs or whatever you want. Yeah. It's just, it becomes a part of us, right?
Well, and it's also good to be able to challenge yourself to learn something a little bit new every single year, every single tour, and sort of progress like that. But
totally, man.
Going back to, I'm not going to make because it's a long story. It's a long history of being in the trenches and working your way up to where you are right now. But everybody has that sort of break that sort of helps them over the top. Like for me, it was, getting in the Alice Cooper band the first time in '96. That sort of opened my world up to a much bigger level of touring. I had done it before, but this really opened up the door, and I always thank Alice for that. Is it true that possibly you might have a documentary series to have thank for your with that, and Honda of all companies? You will thank Honda for your success.
Honda. I thank Honda. No, dude, that was so crazy. So check this out. Long story short, I won't try and harp on it. In the summer of 2014, when I started to tour, when I started to do all this stuff, it was me, a drummer, a bass player in either a Subaru or rented minivan, touring by ourselves with what little gear we had and whatever. And we were playing anywhere from biker bars to college towns when the college was not happening. We were playing anywhere for anything. We ended up scoring a gig to play the parking lot of the Sturgis Buffalo Chip, which was in South Dakota. Anyone, the big Sturgis motorcycle rally. We were playing in the parking lot. When people would drive in, we would be the band set up.
You'd still take that gig. Take it.
I thought it was epic because I was like, oh, we're going to be at Sturgis. I'd heard about this. So many people, all this stuff. Bikes were pulling in, ripping right by us, and we were just jamming. So we're doing this gig, and the main reason was we were able to play the second stage opening for like Leonard Skinner. They were going to be on the first big stage. So we do all these gigs, and by the time we get the last day on that second stage, like we're ready. I'm ready to play. We are jamming our set. I see some guy come over, and he looked official, and he looked like he was mad, and he was staring at me. And then all of a sudden he leaves, comes back, and he's with Ricky Medlock from Skynyrd.
Oh yeah.
And then Ricky's standing there on this.
Ricky Medlock.
Yeah, and Blackfoot. Absolutely. Absolutely. And he's standing there. And then I was like, holy shit, that's Ricky Medlock. And then all of a sudden, Gary Rosington is over there, and they're all standing on the side of the stage watching. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, man, they must really be digging what I'm doing. So after the show, they invite me in the back, and I'm hanging out with the guys in Skynyrd. And to like most of us, not only is it the history and everything about Skynyrd, those songs were like the soundtrack. I don't care if you grew up in 70s, 80s.
No doubt.
Skynyrd has always been there. So even for me riding, on my bike in Wisconsin, I had a Walkman, and I had the best of Skynyrd. So I was such a fan, and they said, "Oh, where are you touring?" And I'm trying to not act like a big dog, but I was like, "Man, we're playing here. We're gonna make our way back to LA somehow."
There's another parking
And I
lot
said,
somewhere. There's definitely another parking.
"Exactly. Yeah, there's got to be another parking lot for us to play somewhere." So we end up talking. I end up exchanging info with these guys, and at this point, someone had reached out to me on Facebook and said, "Hey, man, I have a company that books tours across Europe. Um, I want to book you a tour. You seem like a really good fit." And so they booked us a tour for 30 days, playing every single day across Europe to about anywhere from 20 to 40 people. You know, we did 2.5 weeks every day in Spain. Like, we were doing crazy amounts of shows.
Yep, yep.
And for me, I was on top of the world. You know, I couldn't believe it. And, you know, at that point, I hadn't even dreamt that far, you know, as like a musician, much less to be traveling all over Europe playing. And at this point, there was a guy in LA reached out to Phil, my manager, a guy named James Reed. And he was like a documentarian, if that's the word.
Yeah.
And what is that word? Documentary? He's a documentary
historian, docu-historian. Why not? Let's just make up words.
He was a docu-historian, yes. And he said, "Hey, man, I got this opportunity. I'm looking for struggling artists who are really trying to push. We want to basically make these mini series on these different artists." And Phil goes, "Well, boy, do I have the guy for you." And we
boy,
met
is
him.
he struggling.
Yeah, man. And I met James, and we talked, and he was like, "Man, I think you'd be a good fit for this." And at this point, I was just like, "Yeah, whatever, dude." Like, I'm thinking about, you know, going over to Europe. Like, I don't know who this guy is. Anyways, they start coming to my studio apartment in Hollywood with a camera, him and two other guys, and they start filming me going to rehearsals, going here. They filmed us going to South by Southwest and playing in front of about 15 people. They filmed us, you know, going to Europe and all this different stuff. And I still hadn't really wrapped my head around what they were trying to do. Then after the Europe tour, we got this break. I was talking to the guys in Skinnerd, and they said, "Hey, man, we want you to open up some shows for us over here." Great. So we had 6 shows with Skinnerd. They came, they filmed it. And on the last show in Germany, I ended up jamming with Skinnerd, Sweet Home Alabama. And it was like the MHP Arena. I think there was like 14,000 people there or something. Great. It was crazy, dude. Like,
well, this sounds to me like it was an after-school special. They completely made it from the ground up, and then you ended up playing the big stage with the big band. So I mean, you know, their intent might have been to sell cars at the end of the day, but the success story was laid out and probably very, very inspiring for a lot of people that watched, because I think 7 million people have watched it so far. It's
yeah, man.
It's a big one. Right?
It was crazy. I remember that video came out, and I really didn't know what was happening, but I remember I just kept refreshing my phone, like on Facebook, and it would have like 30,000 views. I'd refresh it again, it'd have like 33,000, like, and I couldn't believe that was happening. The next day from this documentary, I get a call from Zakk Wylde, and he goes, "Hey, man," he goes, "Zakk Wylde," and I was like, "What?" I couldn't believe it. He goes, he goes, "I saw that documentary." He didn't say I saw that documentary. He goes, "Hey, man, my buddy showed me this video of you playing, and you were jamming with Skinnerd and all that stuff. And I just wanted to say, you know, I got this tour coming up, and we think you'd be great opener for this tour."
Was this BLS? Was this the?
Yeah, this was Zakk. Wow. Yeah, it was the Zakk Wylde Book of Shadows 2 tour, and it was going across Europe and then obviously in the States and Canada and stuff.
That is a good fit, the two of you together, I think. You know?
Yeah, and he said, how do you feel about that?" Just like kind of like nonchalant, and I was like, "Yeah, that would be amazing." I was kind of like at a loss for words, and he's like, "All right, cool, man. We'll see you soon." A month later, we were getting over to go to London to start a tour with him, and you know, it was cool because it was such a at the time I didn't think it was a big deal, and then that happened, and
then it's some kind of convergence of all good things start to happen. I always say when you have that wave of success, you ride it as long as you can. It's like a surfer who gets a good wave. He can ride, you know, he can try and ride 20 shitty waves, but what's the point of that? He waits for that one. He always bails out, and then he finds that right wave, and he rides it as long as you can. And I'm happy to see that it was a really good wave for you, man.
Oh, thank you, brother. And from there, that's not to say, as you know, it's not like everything changed overnight. It's like we just got in another van and we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And just, I always said, it was like, I just don't want to stop. I as long as we were out playing. So we went from tour to tour. We did the Zach tour, and then we were out with UFO, and we were out with Saxon, and we were out with Blue Oyster Cult, and
nice.
all these different bands. And it was so cool for me, because not only was I just a fan of, like, all these bands, but I was out there doing it in front of all their audiences, and everyone was just always, it was like every night I had to prove myself. It was like, who the hell is this guy?
It is pretty crazy when you start touring with the bands that you either listen to with big old funky, for me, 1970s headphones when I was growing up doing homework to, or you actually tour with the guys who you had posters on your wall, and you say, I want to, do that job. So during this time, you have 3 albums. This is all you put from then, basically, when it broke, up until just recently. You've put out 3 different records. You started with Old Glory and the Wild Revival, Highwayman EP, and now just most recent Black Magic. So you have a lot of material to choose from. I want to go a little bit. How did the name Old Glory? Because I mentioned it earlier that you have a fascination with it. It's not just your first album title; it's actually the name of your custom guitar as well, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So how that actually happened was, I was at the Guitar Center in Hollywood, and I still hadn't found the one. I hadn't, as guitar players, we always try and find the one. We always try and find, like, what guitar. I was playing anything from Flying V's and secondhand, whatever, anything I could find. And I was in, like, the Guitar Center vintage room one day, and I saw this Les Paul Custom, and man, it was battered. It was beat. Like, that thing had 10 lifetimes before I'd ever seen it. And, broken neck and swap pickups and all this stuff. And I saw it, and I looked at it, and I went, man, I wonder what that thing sounds like. And I remember I picked it up. I just hit an A chord, and it growled. I hadn't even plugged it in, and I was like, wow, I like this. And the Guitar Center employee, he looked at me and he rolled his eyes like, whatever, kid. And I had a Les Paul Jr., like just like a standard Les Paul Jr. at the time, and that was the only guitar I had. And I found this Black Custom. It turned out it was a 1971 Les Paul. And
so it weighed almost as much as you did.
Exactly.
Those ones are so heavy. I remember early 70s Les Paul Custom. You might as well just, have another person next to you.
Yeah, dude, it was so trashed. But I saw it, and it was like I had to have it. So I had that guitar, that Junior, traded it. What did they give me? Like $150 for it or something,
Oh,
Guitar Center.
Okay.
And I got the Guitar Center credit card. I didn't care. I was like, I want to have this guitar. And long story short, I got it. I brought it home. I was staring at it. I started to play some of the riffs I was working on for what turned out to be Old Glory and the Wild Revival. And I saw it, and I was like, man, this guitar looks like it's been through everything. So I said, it's like the Old Glory. I don't know where Old Glory came from, but I just thought about all the music that I love and that inspired me and all of us. And I thought about, like America and like all this stuff, and it was Glory, and I was like, it's Old Glory. It's like that guitar is still alive. It's still, I'm gonna make music with it, and it's like it's been around forever. It was there when all that stuff was made, and now here it is sitting in my studio apartment. It's like, this is Old Glory. So when it came to the record time, I remember I was thinking about it, and I thought about the guitar, and Old Glory Revival, like what. Old Glory and the Wild Revival. I was like, that's kind of a cool name. It reminded me of like a circus sideshow.
Right.
Old Glory and the Wild
fits.
Revival.
And it kind of reminds me of a tour that perhaps you and Leonard Skinner could easily be, booked on again. Why not?
So that was it. That was it. And I was like, let's go with that. And then I just went, and that was my only guitar till 6 months ago. That was the guitar. And obviously moving forward, I was getting so much buzz with this guitar. I'd modded it and chopped it up, and it only had one pickup. I left it with one pickup.
One P90, right? Which is
Yeah.
not your standard. Like I'm a humbucker guy. A P90 is a little bit. It's a beefy single coil, wouldn't you say?
Exactly.
I mean, that's a good way to put it. But if you got the right tone, you got the right amp going to those things scream. I have a Les Paul Jr. I have a Billy Armstrong double cutaway and has P90s on it, and it sounds incredible. But you have one pickup, one P90.
Yep.
What else do you play it through? What else?
I was like, I was just like, I don't know what was wrong with me at the time, but I was just like, man, I don't play with a pick. It's like, I'm going to play this one pickup monster guitar and just make it scream. And I don't even care. I wasn't using any, like at the time I plugged it into a Black Star amp, because Black Star, when I first moved to LA, I got in touch and they were super cool. So they ended up hooking me up with an amp. So I was playing it through that. And it was just, man, P90, it was like a fat, like you said, it was like a fat single coil tone. But I loved that band Mountain. Leslie West was one of my biggest heroes.
Of course, yeah.
Mississippi Queen.
Right.
And when I heard that, and I heard that fat P90 sound. And the best part is those pickups, they're noisy, they buzz. You know, like, it's not a pleasant thing when you're trying to run it with like distortion or high volume and stuff. And it's like, I don't even care. It's like, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. And man, there's just something about them that I love.
That's awesome. So what I'm most impressed of is that you have a one pickup guitar. You play with your fingers. You have a modern type sounding amp, but it's, I would say Black Star isn't. They come from the old Marshall old school tone, but it's a newer company. The thing I'm most proud about is that they made Old Glory into a signature series for you, didn't they?
Which is so crazy to me. They did, yes. And as a player and a fan of just guitars in general and all this stuff, like when they said, hey, people have been asking about this guitar, we want to make this a signature guitar for you, I almost fell out of my chair, man. I couldn't believe it, because, you know, to me, signature guitars are heroes. It's everyone from Clapton, Slash, Joe Perry. Like, right. I'm thinking about our heroes, and I feel so honored. And the best part was, you know, they were able to make it, you know, something that I could really stand behind. We went with Epiphone, which was so cool to me, because, you know, a lot of people are first off going to say, who's this guy? You know, what is this? And the price and the quality of that guitar that they were able to make, it was perfect, man. And I play that Epiphone I've toured with only that guitar, and I'm so proud of it, because, you know, it's a great guitar. It inspires me to play, and now it's inspiring a whole lot of young people, young and old people, to play. And I'm so happy for that.
Well, what I'm happy about for you is that you are part of that new school of guitar hero. I mean, you mentioned some big names with Joe Perry, and of course, you know, there's like a new school emerging, though, and you're definitely one of them, Jared. So I'm glad to have you on the show as well. I need to know, because you mentioned a couple different guitar players throughout the podcast, but is there one or two guys that really did it for you? I think Stevie Ray Vaughan was kind of a recurring guy in your world, but
yes,
who else?
Really, when it came down to it, Stevie Ray was a huge one, because when I was able to see him on tape, and like I saw like his power and his energy through, and what he did, he took the blues and he took it somewhere else. That was a huge one for me. Leslie West, like I said, from Mountain, was like, he was another one of my guys. He really inspired me with more of the, not only the gear, but the attitude, the tone, you know, simplistic style that was just like, I always equate him. He was like a grizzly bear. Like, it was, when you heard him coming, it was just like, uh-oh, you know, get out of the way. Guys, you know, old school guys, obviously Clapton, Beck, Page, the blues guys, of course. But not only that, you know, I grew up, and, you know, my guitar heroes were, you know, everyone from Zakk Wylde and Dimebag and Jerry Cantrell, and that's the stuff I was hearing on the radio as a kid. So
as a guitar player, that's a great spectrum to listen to, because you listen to the new school guys, you listen to the old school guys, and you came up with something totally unique yourself, you know?
Yeah, man. I love all of it. I'm not like, oh, I only listen to stuff from 70 back.
So with all these names, all these guitarists from the old school to the new school, is there a certain album, though, that still inspires you, moves you up to this day?
Yeah, man. I mean, there's a ton of albums that
one.
move me to this day. I got to pick one.
If you had to.
I'm just going to have to say this just because it's true. It's Are You Experienced Jimi Hendrix? Because to me, when I first heard that record, and I know that record's now, it was 67, so it's just so long ago. But when I heard that as a budding guitar player, when I put that, it was a CD, when I put that CD on and I heard Purple Haze and I heard Manic Depression and I heard fuzz guitar and I heard the feedback, I was so blown away. And I mean, I heard that for the first time in 2004. So, you know, this was
doesn't matter.
A million years after.
If it's the first time you hear it and it moves you, it doesn't matter what year it was actually made. I mean,
yeah,
that's why
going from there, it was like Eddie, hearing Eddie for the first time.
Yeah. Well, man, I can't tell you how many copies of Van Halen's first record I ruined trying to learn Eruption, because that's what you had to learn from the actual vinyl back in those days.
Yeah,
scratched
totally.
the hell out of some records. so that's good advice. So go listen to Are You Experienced, and then for the folks that are listening at home, go listen to Are You Experienced, and then go check out Jared's newest, Black Magic. And can I look forward to hearing, and can our audience look forward to hearing more stuff coming out soon?
Yeah. Actually, we just released a single about a week and a half ago. It's called Threw Me to the Wolves. That's something that's obviously Black Magic, the record. And then we just released a single, so people can check that out now. And I'm actually now in the process of writing all the tunes and getting ready to do a new record, which is, it's going to be amazing. I can't wait.
Well, we did meet each other last summer at Sweden Rock Festival, and we got to actually bond as we drove all the way from Sweden Rock Festival back up to Stockholm, because you were doing some guitar clinics as well. We had a good bond there, but I also have a little bit of history with your manager, Phil.
I know this, which is so cool.
I taught him guitar when he was about, maybe he was 15 and I was 16, or it was somewhere around there, or maybe he was a little bit younger, but I was, I taught him guitar lessons, and now he's managing one of the up and coming guitar heroes of our generation, of your generation. You're a kid. But I really appreciate you coming on In the Trenches. You've definitely proven yourself In the Trenches worthy, and you're still doing it. So the new album, or they can go check it out right now on the new single. They can check out on YouTube. And the best way to get in touch with you, is it on Instagram?
Yeah, either Instagram or, I still have all the Facebook page and all that stuff. So if someone wants to get in touch, they definitely can. But yeah, I would say Instagram is the easiest way. Just shoot me a message. And I'm always posting, that's now we have so much more time, man. If somebody, I'm going to answer,
I don't know if you saw, but I had a challenge to you.
Oh,
go on my Instagram, and I gave it because I saw everybody. Brian May was putting out licks, and then John Five was putting out licks.
You challenged me?
I challenged you, and that's why you have to go on to the Instagram right about now. You can know I'm old school when I call it the Instagram. So
go on the Instagram.
You would be at Jared James Nichols. But here's
that's
the funny,
me.
Here, I had such a good take of my performance. I called you Jared James Michaels, but I left it. That's how good the performance of the lick was. So those of you who are listening, see if my challenge is Jared James Nichols worthy. I'm at Ryan Roxie on Instagram. You're at Jared James Nichols at Instagram. And Old Glory. How can someone find Old Glory if they want a little bit of Old Glory themselves?
If anyone wants to check it out, they can either scroll through my Instagram and see a bunch of pictures of it or videos. But all the retailers. I think what happened though is we only did a limited run, and we ended up doing quite a few more than we were originally going to. But I don't think there's many left that are out. So the best place I would say is check, if you're in the States, right, Guitar Center or Sam Ash or Sweetwater. Otherwise, I'm not sure, Luthman or.
That's
I
over
remember
here in
I was
Sweden,
in Sweden. But they're around. Just type in Old Glory Jared James Nichols. You will definitely see him.
That's perfect, man. Well, you know what? The guitar stops definitely have to open at some point. But for the time being, we're hunkered down. We're being creative. You're writing for the new album. The single is out. And thank you so much for taking the time to be on In the Trenches.
I'm so happy to, man. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thanks,
really
bud. Hey,
it, man.
hang on the line for a second. I'm going to say goodbye to our folks. And
Okay.
if you want to check out more episodes of In the Trenches, you can go to your favorite platform, which is Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever you want, or go to our official YouTube channel, or you can always go to ryanroxie.com/podcast. Again, thanks for listening. It was All Things Guitars. Our guest today was Jared James Nichols, and him and Old Glory, I think, proved themselves more than In the Trenches worthy. We'll see you next time. And until the next episode, enjoy the ride. Cheers, man.
In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.